Hey, it's Dave. Welcome to the Business of Fun. If you're new here, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today's episode is with CEO of LifeBlue, Nicki Purcell. We talk about leadership and relationships and revenue and a whole lot of fun stuff. But first, before I get into all that, how is everybody doing? Today is the 13th of July. I can't remember what day or month it is some days, and I'm sure that a lot of you are in the same position. It's been a rough couple months, rough couple weeks. As I have gotten the podcast back up and running, it's been a lot of wondering what I can offer to help people, what I can give people that'll help them move forward, how I can help in some little way give back to the community that's given so much to me. There's a couple things I want to point you to this morning or / afternoon, depending on whenever I get the podcast finally completely edited and posted. The first thing is the Talking Tickets newsletter, which you can get by visiting my website. It's davewakeman.com. Click on the newsletter tab, and you will see a sign up for 2 different newsletters, but one's Talking Tickets. Inside Talking Tickets, I started to do a Slack channel back in March and April when we first went into lockdown, called the Talking Tickets Slack channel, which you can join pretty simply. If you want a link and you haven't got it, just send me an email for any of this stuff. It's dave@davewakeman.com, and I'll make sure you get whatever you need. But over the last couple of days is layoffs and firings and restructurings and all these different bad things have started to happen for folks. I put a couple spots in the channel for people who are looking for a new gig or who are offering a new gig. I don't know if it's useful for folks, but if it is a resource that you want to take part in, send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com. Let me know. We're trying to figure out ways to keep people moving in the right direction, give people a chance to connect, and give you an opportunity to get on your feet and get back to normal as quickly as possible. Another great resource I want to point you towards is the We Will Recover website. You can find that at wewillrecover.live. This is something put together by my friends at ActivityStream. It was led by Einar and Martin and their team. It's a great resource. People from all over the world, like the Ticketing Professionals Conference in Australia, headed by Angela and Joe. The Ticketing Professionals Conference in the UK from Andrew and Carol. TRG and Joe Robinson. Made Media. All kinds of, Stay 22. Tons and tons of people from all over the world giving content, classes, ideas, all kinds of things to help people get back on their feet. So check out wewillrecover.live. And then also make sure you take some time and look at the Booking Protect website. That's bookingprotect.com. We have some stuff going up there that's focused on the future. It's focused on revenue, relationships, reinvention, recovery. That's bookingprotect.com, and you click the link that says Tell Me More, not File a Claim, and look for the blog. There's a bunch of stuff going on there, and we'll continue to make sure we get stuff up there. As for you, send me a note. Let me know how you're doing. It's dave@davewakeman.com. I have been telling everybody, look, just call me, just text me, just email me, no matter what you need. I've set up, I think, at least 6 phone calls this week with folks that want to talk through something, have an issue that they're trying to deal with and don't know how to deal with it, or just want to talk, right? Because things are stressful and everybody's a little on edge. All of those are acceptable reasons. You just don't need an excuse. The fact that you're listening to this introduction is enough reason for me and you to talk on the phone right now. I know from dealing with the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009, the aftermath of the September 11th terrorist attacks, and some of the uncertainty in the economy in the 90s, that when an event like this happens, it's very stressful for people. People don't necessarily know how to talk about things. People can feel alone. They can feel isolated. They can feel uncertain, unsure. I don't want you to go through these things on your own. So, make sure you send me an email at dave@davewakeman.com. You can send me a text. If you're not in the States, I'm on WhatsApp. My cell phone number is +1 for the area, for the country code, then 917-705-6301. Use me as a resource. I want to be available to people, even if it's just to be like, dude, this sucks. People have done it for me. I want to return the favor as much as possible. So let's do that. Now, let's talk about Nicki Purcell. Nicki is really, really a great leader. And the first thing that we talk about is the way that she's handled leading her team through the pandemic. Their offices are in Dallas, and Dallas has become a bit of a hot spot. So it's a pretty big challenge to deal with. So the first thing we do is we talk about Nicki's philosophy on leadership and her ideas on how she's been providing the best experience possible for her team. We get into a lot of other stuff, though. We talk about communications, and we talk about change, and we talk about transformation of your business, transformation of your business model. We talk about how people's time is compressed, how people feel overwhelmed. We talk about brands, and we talk about revenue, and we talk about understanding what brands and revenue and marketing can look like during the pandemic and after. We talk about putting the emphasis on the customer. We talked about some case studies that LifeBlue and Nicki have created. They've done a really, really great job working with FC Dallas, which was one of the first things I learned about, and how they have helped them create a season or package, not necessarily a season ticket package, but like a mini package that better reflects the way that people buy tickets and engage with the team now. We talked about being busy, being overwhelmed. We worked in some jokes. Nicki talked about Tesla unprompted. It was all kinds of great stuff. I was really excited to have the chance to talk to Nicki. I'm a little rusty, so any challenges in the conversation are on me, because Nicki is great. I'm excited for you to hear her and hear her talk about leadership and revenue and her vision for the company and the industry. She's just fantastic. And so without anything else from me, because I'm just rambling now, here's my conversation with Nicki Purcell on the Business of Fun podcast. All right. I'd like to welcome Nicki Purcell to the Business of Fun podcast. Nicki, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm totally fine now. You are a special guest to me because, like I told you before we started talking, this is the first time I've been in my office in 3 or 4 months. So everything feels like normal again, or sort of normal. So I'm excited to sit in my old chair and everything. So this is going to be fun.
Great.
Yeah, we don't run a serious operation over here at this podcast. But I did want to start out by talking with you about, we are in the middle of the pandemic still, and one of the first things that I noticed about you, and was one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure that I asked you to be on the podcast, was during this time was great uncertainty for folks. You have been, at least for somebody who's from the outside, it seems like a really, really strong, taking a really strong leadership stance, and really done a great job of, keeping your team together, solving problems, working together, and, moving through as a team in an environment that doesn't necessarily, lend itself to that in all differences. So I'm kind of curious about, where your leadership philosophy and how you've made some of the decisions for your team during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I feel like one of the things that's been really challenging, as you all know, is that people are having to manage through this level of uncertainty. And it goes really in line with, as you mentioned, my leadership philosophy, which has really been that people follow people, not strategies. And even if we have the best strategy laid out with the best vision and the best, potential PowerPoint that they can follow along with, at the end of the day, they're going to get in line with people that they believe in and people that they believe have their best interest in mind. And so as we've walked down this path and had to think about our future, what's really led, my direction in terms of our team has been transparency and being open and honest about the challenges that the pandemic faced, not just for our business, but for our team members, and then being able to set a vision for both the short term and the long term, recognizing honestly that it may change, but that even in this time, nobody has all the answers. We can just sort of muddle through it together.
Well, and it's interesting because you talked about the reality that nobody knows exactly what things are going to look like, and that communicating this thing, your vision and your mission and short and long-term goals is number one, very important. But number two, in a time of great uncertainty, I think is a little bit more important as well because, the feeling I get is like everybody's so uncertain that it creates a sense of, I want to say vertigo, but I don't know if that's exactly right. So how do you, strike that balance, right? So that you're telling people this is what we know right now, but I want you to know that this is not 100% set in stone because none of it can be.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was thinking about how to best present to the team our vision and how we're going to manage through this uncertainty, I actually thought about the movie, with Michael J. Fox and when they were in the DeLorean and they were, about to set in Back to the Future a date and time in which they were going to go back to. And, Marty looks over and he says, "Where are we going? Where are the roads?" And he says, "Don't worry, there are no roads where we're going." And that was a sense of like, wow, like in the future, you mean there's not even roads? And then the car obviously takes off and it flies. And I actually used that as a meme, and it was the perspective of, where we're going is an unpaved road. We don't necessarily know, and there isn't anything that says, oh, when a pandemic happens and, one of global scale, this is what you do. But that level of uncertainty is what I try to draw a parallel against, which is even though this is completely new to us, the fact that we as a business and as people are facing crisis of both economic concerns, business concerns, and even just emotional and anxiety concerns, that actually does have a history that we have, had to grapple with in the past. And so while the circumstances are very different of a pandemic, certainly going through economic downturns and, recognizing the impact that it has is not new. And we can take some lessons from how, we've really been successful in the past, whether it's ourselves or others, and take the best of what has come out of challenging times and try to apply that to the future. And so while, not apples to apples, certainly there are really good examples to look back to be able to take, some guidance from.
Yeah, no, the example of using history as a way to guide the reaction now is incredibly important. We've only known each other a couple of weeks now, but you and I don't know if we even touched on this the last time we spoke, but that's exactly where I point people towards. I go, this is new because we haven't probably seen a combination of all these things come together. But just look at history or even look at examples of other countries, and you can learn some things that maybe you can use as guides for yourself. I'm curious, since I have a tendency to use some of these similar examples. Where are you pointing people to look for examples that they can follow or learn from?
Well, we are a business in which we really try to help our client partners transform digitally. And before we came into this pandemic, there are certainly certain industries and certain client partners that are a little bit ahead of that curve. And we're already recognizing that digital technology enables them to do things and change things in their business in ways they hadn't even imagined. Certainly coming into this space, there are going to be people who wake up to that now and say, gosh, we were nowhere where we needed to be. But we're sort of fortunate in the sense that we were already a group of people who were looking for ways to help clients transform and taking technology that they hadn't used before and applying it in a way that, was really successful and created value for the business. And so for us, part of what we're trying to focus on is a little bit with the bandwidth that we have found ourselves having inwardly to be able to say, well, we advise folks all the time on how to do this, and are we keeping ourselves accountable to that as well? And so when we went through, a period of time right after COVID hit and everything kind of slowed down, or it felt like the world sort of paused as it related to, client work, we started recognizing that we had opportunity to catch up, if you will, on some of the things that we always wanted to do but didn't find the opportunity or time to be able to do. And so we have really spent some time focusing on what our future is and ensuring that if we could get ahead from a timing perspective, that we could go and be very specific and mindful about what we wanted to produce in this time. And so we were really, really excited to be able to have, resources for the first time to put them against, selfishly, a little bit of our own business.
Yeah, and I think we definitely talked about when we were prepping for this thing, was that idea that I'm going to use this crisis as a opportunity to recreate the business and to put us on a better footing going forward. And I think it really relates very well to the work you do for clients too. It's this idea of constant reinvention, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that you work with the companies across a wide spectrum of industries. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, so if I am, it's totally on me. But one of the things that you do when you're talking to your clients is you talk to them about reinventing, how they face the world, right? Because I think if you look at the LifeBlue website, you might have an initial reaction like, oh, it's like about websites. And you and I have both talked about this for quite a bit. It's not really about that. It's about reimagining the way you present yourself to the world. Am I wrong, or am I accurate there?
No, you're definitely accurate. We have a lot of people who come to us and say, hey, I'm really interested in, redesigning my website. And the website, in my opinion, is really just an outward expression of some other symptomatic things that might be going on within the business. Certainly there is opportunity within a website from a brand perspective to provide a different outward approach, but ultimately a lot of times the digital presence that you have plays a significant role in how your business generates leads, how you actually generate revenue, how you're able to create value on the back end in terms of a system, in terms of efficiency. And so digital technology is really something that is much broader than just the website itself. And so when we're talking with client partners and we're thinking about solutions into the future, a lot of times we use examples that are really out there in the wild that people are very accustomed to and really used to, because we have to bring it back into their world and what they've experienced. And, everyone looks to, companies like Uber, and you say, wow, that was transformational. And, at the end of the day, something that I think is crazy is that, taxi could have created Uber, the taxi system that existed, but they didn't. Instead, they were disrupted. And the same thing with, say, Airbnb. If Hilton Hotels decided to wake up today and say, we have to think about ways that people are going to put themselves in control of the situation in the future, let's think through that in a different way. That absolutely could have been an invention or innovation that they, thought of, and instead they didn't. They were disrupted. And so what we're always trying to do is figure out what is the trend that we see and how can we actually get out in front of it. And ultimately, that's where we're looking at that for the same thing for LifeBlue, but we're looking at it for our client partners as well, and just asking those questions, always with the consumer at the forefront of that.
Oh, yes. No, we speak a very similar language on putting the customer first. And what I'm curious about here, and this is, it's interesting because of what we're dealing with right now, and change has really accelerated. And you talked about trends. What are some of the trends that you are talking through with people right now as having going to be having a bigger impact over maybe, and I don't know what time frame you're using with people, but I'm talking, most of the time in my conversations, it's 18 to 36 months. And you can go shorter or longer if you want. But I'm curious what trends you're talking about, because again, this is something that I feel people don't pay necessarily nearly enough attention to until it's too late.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like even before we came into the pandemic, one of the Uber trends that we began to see is that people just felt time compressed. No matter what you were trying to do, you never had time to get to the things that you felt like you should be getting to. There was a sense of being overwhelmed. And what I think has been so interesting about the pandemic is people have almost been forced to not just figure out what to do in a different way. In some ways, people have experienced time for the first time, real luxuries of time to go back and think and to say, all of our extracurricular activities, if you will, have slowed down. And so now that we have, say, a free Saturday, free of, kids' sports, free of all the things that used to just eat up our entire calendar, what are we going to do with that time? And I think a lot of people have figured out that some of the things they thought were priorities are no longer priorities, because even with the bandwidth, they haven't decided to prioritize them, right? So this whole idea of how people think of time and where priorities are, I think is an interesting perspective with the pandemic, because usually when I talk to people, they're in one of two camps. They feel like they have just got this onslaught of time to figure out what to binge watch next, and they can't really go out, and they're not as busy doing concerts or going to sporting events, so it's how they fill their time. And then that's juxtaposed people who feel like they've never been busier in their entire lives. And it's really fascinating how there's been such a parallel and a divide in that sense. But the one thing that it always comes back to is this level of personalization. And it's all about me, and it's all about something being customized for me based on what I'm trying to accomplish. And the one thing that I think is going to be even more fascinating when we think out into the future is that a lot of times people were using websites, technology to be able to be faster, to be more efficient. And sometimes the solutions weren't. Sometimes they were things that ultimately was actually faster to pick up the phone and call someone, or to find an appointment and do something differently. And so many people have adopted new technology that they hadn't used before this pandemic. They hadn't previously decided to have, grocery delivery, or they hadn't previously, in some cases, used things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And that adoption of technology for the holdouts, if I will, those who weren't really adopting it at the same rate, is probably going to accelerate now. And so one of the things that is very prevalent in our business is that overwhelmingly the amount of traffic coming to digital presences via mobile devices over a desktop is certainly the majority. And yet the majority of the commerce and the revenue that's being traded is not happening via mobile device. And so one of the things that I feel like is obvious from that is that people simply don't have a good enough experience on a 4 or 6 inch mobile screen to go through the hassle of actually converting online. They'd rather do some research there, make some decisions, and at the end of the day, when it comes to punching in, say, all those digits on your credit card and your expiration, your CVV code, you're going to wait until you're at a bigger screen and you have time to concentrate on it. And from my perspective, there are many who are waking up to the fact that it's not just Amazon, but many others are setting the bar for how good that expectation should be in a mobile world, and they're going to have to meet the consumers to that challenge.
Yeah, I was wondering how you knew about me and my shopping habits. What's sort of the
not just me, Dave,
scary,
but pretty much Google and Facebook
thing.
and Amazon and everyone else knows.
Yeah, no, but it's completely true. It's and I would say that for me, the example that you gave of either I have so much time to binge watch or I've never been busier. It depends. For me, it depends what day you catch me on. But I can say for my lady, she has never been busier. I mean, she is busy. It's like so incredibly busy. It's like the pandemic hit, and she had to like recreate her entire business to happen remotely, and like her and her team are like extremely busy. So yeah, she's like not binge watching anything. And I'm like, well, didn't you see Tiger King? I mean, come on. And then she just rolls her eyes at me, but that's me. Now, well, we all have our thing. Now, one thing I am interested in is you brought up the idea of commerce, so much traffic happening on mobile devices, and then not nearly as much of the commercial activity happening on mobile because the experience is not as great.
Right.
And I know one real good example, because this is, largely people who are in entertainment, tickets, and sports. You have a couple great case studies of how you've helped organizations walk through that. Can you give us an example of, how you're able to transform an organization's front-facing, commerce platform in a manner that allows people to kind of more simply create personalization in a better digital journey so that they keep equals, my favorite thing, money?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it usually for us as a process starts with what we call discovery, which is trying to learn as much as we possibly can about the experience that exists today. So we have tools and technology in which we're able to go in and not go down the data road as you were starting to go down, Dave, where we learn everything about an individual and their personal data, but rather their processes and how they're actually traversing digital experiences and websites. And so we can drop technology onto existing experiences and just see, are people following a path, a journey? How many clicks are they actually having to click on before they're getting to where they want to go? Are they having to, pinch and zoom, or is something built in such a way that it's really intuitive and they don't have to think about it? Because it really is, from a design perspective, something that, we subscribe to, which is don't make me think. As long as you make someone stop and think, that's a hurdle or a friction point in the journey. And so a lot of times our starting point is understanding how people are using something today. And then once we're able to see those challenges, what we're able to do is build something that's more streamlined and more in line with expectations of what we can ultimately get to a higher conversion rate. And so sometimes that is really simple. It can be doing things like increasing just the page load times and speed. Like, I always joke that, speed is a feature. And so if you're not paying attention to how long that little scroll on the screen is taking, then, that's something that ultimately you could be losing people simply because of how long it's taking to process. But your question specifically about, an example is maybe one of the best examples I can use is with a sports team that we work with, which is FC Dallas here in the Dallas area. Major League Soccer, certainly in a very challenging market where we've got lots of sports fans and highly valuable sports teams, just vying for all sports fans' attention. And, the challenge here is, how do you get people to come out and fill an 18,000 seat venue, every single match? And it feels as though there was this, strong desire that as long as someone came to the very first match and they experienced it and they had a great experience, the goal was quickly, let's get them into a full season and get that commitment. And one of the things that we started looking at is that, the sports world has been very prevalent in creating things like partial plans and mini plans, and understanding that sometimes people aren't ready to take that full leap. That they came to a game, and before they're ready to be, a full season member, they've got some paths to take, and perhaps it's less than that full commitment. But one of the things that we noticed that was consistent in everything that we studied in these partial plans is that the team was still 100% guiding the decision-making on which games, which matches, which perks and benefits, what they were going to offer related to that. And it seemed a little bit strange. Again, back to putting the consumer at the forefront of the experience. If ultimately what you want to care about is the person's experience and them getting what they want to get, it felt very easy for us to go back and say, we can build a model in which it's 100% custom to what the initial fan wants. And so there was a solution that we built that enabled a fan to come in and pick however many matches they wanted, 3, 5, 8, 12, whatever that looked like. And not just what number fits them, but specifically which opponents and what times. And then ultimately from there, based on what they selected, they could go in and pick which benefits and perks lined up with that. And so if they care a lot about things like meet the team, or giving their kids the experience of a VIP tour, or getting on the field before or after play, then those are the types of things that enrich the experience, and they're going to include in their package. If they really don't, and quite honestly, all they're looking for is the best deal possible, they don't want to feel later like they, paid too much because they can see, in a secondary market how much cheaper tickets might be going for, then a perk or a benefit could actually be a percentage off. And thinking through what is unique to, the actual fan and putting them in charge of their experience has been a really great way for shepherding someone from what felt like just a transaction to a relationship. And isn't that really what, a membership or season member really is to a team? It's a relationship. And so that's been a really good example for us anyway of, helping folks understand who really is in charge, and what's usually best for the fan or the consumer is what's best for the business as well.
Yeah, you brought up a whole bunch of stuff that is really, really super important, I think. But I want to start with one because I'm curious, because this came up in a conversation I had yesterday. You talked about making the buying process simpler for people. And don't make me think is the way you phrased it, which I think is probably pretty good, especially if you're talking to me. I will give you my credit card, I will spend my money, and we will have fun as long as I don't have to think about it. But I'm curious because I've seen data that and examples that kind of lead me to be uncertain about the answer to this question, and it's about friction. And is it right that we should go for a completely frictionless experience, or is there certain points of friction that are actually helpful during the customer journey?
No, I think that's a great question. I think that it probably depends on the journey we're talking about.
You get one serious question a day. You get one serious question a day. That's it.
Just one, right?
That's it. I'm done now.
And then you're done. And mic drop, right?
Leave on a high.
I think it comes. Yeah, leave on a high. So this is how I would look at this. At the end of the day, what we want is for the consumer to be satisfied. And a satisfied consumer leads to good things down the road. And so if what we're asking someone to do is to make a very serious purchase with a pretty big investment or commitment, we may intentionally want them to double check what it is that they're deciding to do before they make that call. Because the worst thing we could do is have to go back and recognize afterwards how we ultimately need to refund that person or walk them through something that felt intuitive, but in the end, ultimately to them as they looked at it and reflected on it, felt like it was a sort of gotcha or some sort of thing that wasn't as transparent as it should be. So the only time that I can think that adding intentional friction points or something that actually stops someone and makes them think is potentially when there's a commitment level that is large enough that we want to make sure that they understand what it is that they're committing to. And remember, commitment level isn't necessarily price point. I look to phenomenal companies that charge quite a bit for their products and have great user journeys. In fact, even though I'm not in the market for one, and I'd love to be, if you go to the Tesla website, the customization of choosing your Tesla and purchasing through their site, I think is about 4 different questions it asks you in total. And then you can spend a huge amount of money. And all you did was ultimately answer 4 questions. And so, at the end of the day, it's not about price point. It's about what it is that someone's committing to and whether or not they should pause and reflect on that for the purpose of making sure that they get into the right decision, that they're looking to make.
I only laugh because I feel seen, because you obviously are tracking my data. But it's the truth. It's like, and they do a really great job. And I'll tell you this from experience of also when the handoff between the digital experience and the person experience, because they can get an extra $5,000 or $10,000 out of you very easily. But and that's right. It's that journey is very simple. It's very there's enough friction in it so that it helps, but it seems designed in a way to make you really give you the encouragement to spend more money, which I was totally happy to do. And that's great. But let me ask you another question here.
Well, the other thing too is maybe.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh no.
Well, no, the only other comment I was going to make is that something that is an underlying current with that I think is relevant is that the entire online experience is sleek and sophisticated and really seamless. And if you think about it, it really does match the brand at which Tesla is as well. And so, the vehicle that you walk out with is that same sort of brand that you're experiencing when you're online. And I think that matching of consistency in the consumer expectation is a really interesting part and a critical component as well.
Well, to see that now we're tracking what we're talking about here, because I was going to ask you too, because the experience is great, right? It is seamless and it's sleek and it matches the brand. I don't want to disparage anybody, but like a lot of times when you're buying tickets on the internet, the experience that you give the fan when they're buying online or when they're engaging with you in the buying journey doesn't necessarily always match up with what the experience is. I think the way that the teams would want it to appear.
Yep.
And I hope I said that as delicately, because I know a lot of times it's hard to get everything exactly right. But if people go and look at that FC Dallas example that we've used, that matches what the brand would want to do. And I think the point with Tesla or FC Dallas or any of these organizations is that the tools are available, that it's not cost prohibitive or extremely it's not hard to do that now. Like the technology and the tools have come so far that people can create that, make a consistent brand image. Or am I again way in over my head in the technology department?
No, I think you're exactly right. In fact, we didn't talk about that, but I think that's a really good example in that part of what we recognized when we rethought the FC Dallas experience is that when you take a look at some of these other sports teams in Dallas and you're trying to win over that sports fan, many people and teams cannot offer what FC Dallas can in terms of a very sort of family environment, the ability to put players in front of your kids, have them sign autographs, take pictures, et cetera. That level of accessibility doesn't happen with the other sports teams. And so what you feel is that your experience is very much about you and how you built it and how you wanted it for your friends, family, and whoever you're coming to the match with. And so if that's what ultimately the team puts on the pitch and has the opportunity to deliver, then the site itself and the experience that they put people through should feel that same way, that it's all about you and it's all about being custom to what you want and what you don't, care about keeping out. So I think that the brand consistency is absolutely key. And when your question is about technology, I mean, we genuinely feel like if you can dream it and you have a vision for how it should work, it can be built. Folks in technology who try to limit that and say, oh, well, we can't do that because of this, or, oh, we didn't feel like this, in our opinion, that's, folks who might not want to look hard enough for the right solution. Because at the end of the day, technology in some ways is what you build. It may not have even been built yet, but it certainly still can be. So any kind of, brand or digital presence that exists should be a manifestation of what the vision is of what you're delivering in the experience as well.
Well, right. And you brought up an interesting point where it's like a lot of times when you're dealing with a vendor or a partner, right? And they go, oh, well, that's going to be hard or challenging to do or whatever, excuse gets thrown into the mix. It's typically a sign that the person is trying to push you towards a cookie cutter solution. And I think that, right. This is, again, something we didn't probably talk about before, and I didn't know I was going to bring this up either. It's like, I think our philosophies match up very well in this, in that, like, the technology solutions are so accessible, and that each business, even though there's a lot of similarities between a lot of businesses, there's so much competition that you have to be willing and able to show exactly who you are. And the technology and the solutions are available to make that happen. And that a lot of times the biggest challenge that you struggle with is asking yourself the right question to figure out how exactly you want to position yourself, and what you exactly want your customers to feel and think when they work with you. Or am I a little bit too pie in the sky on that?
No, I think you're exactly right. I think you have to be authentic and you have to be unique, and ultimately, because you didn't use this word, but what I feel like is there's a lot of noise out there. There is a lot of clutter, and there is a tremendous amount of distraction. And so if you're going to cut through that, it has to be something that differentiates. And the only way to figure out what is unique to you is to ask yourself those hard questions. And once you net out on what that is and how you can offer something different and offer something of value, that's then what should be matched online in your experience that you build.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think to me, that's a great answer. I like it. I mean, noise and clutter. I use the example all the time, and I'm sure this number is either not accurate, has changed, or it's irrelevant because it seems real. And that's that the average American is inundated with 5,000 or more requests for attention every day, from ads, pop-ups, your banner ads, like all these different things, junk email, regular email, all these different things that are trying to hit us each day. So to cut through that, and to think you're going to cut through that by being the same as everybody else is completely absurd.
Right.
At least in my opinion.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we again a lot of. I usually want to have a little more adversarial conversation. Maybe we're too in line on this. This is crazy. I got to bring my podcasting chops back up to speed here. But one thing, or laughing helps everything. One thing I do want to talk to you about though is like you are a female CEO in tech and in sports, which are two industries that are not necessarily always easy for for women to be involved in. And I want to ask you about that because I think that there's a big focus on making sure that people you don't hear the same voices all the time. And I'm a big proponent of that, right? Because I go, I'm really if I'm smart at all, which is debatable most of the time. If you ask my wife, she's going to tell you, it's 50-50. I figure that one of the things that makes me seem as either as wise or as knowledgeable or as just like whatever people would nice things they would use to describe me, the mean things I'll help them with, is the fact that I look for a diversity of opinions. I also know that sometimes can be a struggle for people. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you cope with that? Because I think that's something we talked about a little bit offline, and I was interested about that, and I think it might be helpful for some of the people that are listening to the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, maybe I'll start with diversity and being inclusive. I think when it's almost simple for us to make sure that we focus on that because of the industry that we're in. If our goal is to focus on creating value for client partners and doing so in a digital space, that means that anybody who interacts with the site or the experience that we produce for our client partners needs to have a fantastic experience. And that means ubiquitously across any ethnic diversity, any socioeconomic diversity, any kind of individual. And so, not only are we looking to build something that is inclusive, we're looking to build something under the circumstances that they may be faced with. I mean, that could be making the experience accessible from an ADA compliance perspective. A lot of people don't even think that websites these days have to be. But, one of the things that we've learned is up to a third of the audience can have some type of disability, and it could even just be that their arm's in a sling, so they can't use the mouse normally. And so to be able to provide additional ways to traverse through a website if you don't have the ability to use, say, your right arm is a key component of being inclusive when you build. And so that is something that's been in the forefront for us every time we think of a solution is who's the end user, and it's not probably ourselves. And so how do we put ourselves in the shoes of the end user and a variety of them? And the best way we can possibly do that is to make sure that we're hiring a diverse group of individuals, that we're talking to them, that we're doing the right types of research and testing solutions that we build with a very diverse audience. You brought something else up, though, that was about being, I guess, female in this, industry itself. Both sports and tech are, not necessarily the place that are full of women leaders. And, from my perspective, it could simply be because I grew up in a competitive space. I have, if you can believe it, Dave, another Nicki 2.0. I'm an identical twin. And, the thing about twins are that they can have a healthy competition. And so, that certainly was something that is innate in my personality and unique to me. But I grew up and then ultimately went on to marry a football coach. Well, there's another level of competitiveness that entered my life. And, today I stay certainly around the sports world as a mom of three busy boys that are, competitively playing sports. But in this space, part of what I used to feel challenged about was that there was this idea of the glass ceiling and this perspective that, you could only get to a certain level because you're going to be struck by challenges and hurdles. And what I feel like I've come to learn, or at least this is my perspective of it, is that it's not so much the glass ceiling, but the sticky floor. And that there were a series of things that caused me to doubt or question whether or not I wanted to continue to progress in my career and try to take on additional responsibilities. And, the sticky floor are more things that come innately and are sort of self-doubt and self-concern. But nonetheless, it's really an internal struggle to figure out what it is that you want to achieve, what's the right time in your life to try to achieve those, and then go after what you want. And, having a little dash of competitiveness in there hasn't hurt to be able to try to achieve that.
I say when we were, I don't know if you watched the Michael Jordan documentary earlier in the spring and summer, and I would see a little bit of this reaction online where like maybe people who are a little bit younger than us would be like, oh, he was a maniac and he was like this, and I was like, going, man, that's just how you. That's what winning looks like. I mean, which I'm sure is not the right answer, but I was like, going, I am an extremely competitive person. I always, and I think that's that's a great answer, because I think one of the things that we all need to recognize is that we all do struggle with self-doubt, and it can be a struggle to understand exactly what you want. And and I'm glad you explained it in that way, because I think that sometimes it becomes really difficult for people to understand that someone like you or someone like me still deals with self-doubt and still doesn't necessarily know what in the world we want sometimes. And
Right.
that's okay, because I don't think that we necessarily always do a good job in the culture in tech and sports and entertainment of allowing people to see that and understand that. And I think it's a really great a message to share with folks. Let me ask you, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, of course, personally, I'm on, LinkedIn and Twitter and, of course, Facebook and Instagram and most social networks. But that could be something that I'm, happy to share with. And you can find me, Twitter is Nicki Purcell 1, and LinkedIn, is obvious as well. But you can also find a link to myself and my bio through LifeBlue's website, which is lifeblue.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, Nicki, thank you so much for doing this for us today.
No, thank you so much, Dave, for having me on. It's been fun.
What do you think of my conversation with Nicki Purcell? Let me know. Send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com. You can check out my website. It is davewakeman.com, where you find my blog, any event calendar things, the whole Dave Wakeman universe right there in one spot. So check that out, davewakeman.com. Like I mentioned in the introduction, make sure you check out some of these resources, right? If you need me, you can send me an email, dave@davewakeman.com. You can get in the Talking Tickets newsletter or the Talking Tickets Slack channel. If you get involved in the Slack channel, introduce yourself. There's a bunch of different groups there and things that we've set up. Try and just give people an opportunity to connect, get back on their feet, get some new ideas, get moving in the right direction. Visit the Booking Protect website at bookingprotect.com to find all kinds of things about reinvention, repairing and rebuilding relationships, revenue, and a whole lot more. That's bookingprotect.com, and click on the more information, not the claim side. Okay, check out the We Will Recover .live website. So that's We Will Recover, an initiative put together by Martin and Einar from Activity Stream along with their team. It's great. They have brought together people from all over the world to help come up with new ideas, new ways of thinking through your business as the pandemic continues to impact us all over the place. So We Will Recover .live. As always, I want to thank you for being here. If you got this far, tomorrow is the 14th of July, Tuesday and Wednesday, the 14th and 15th. The NATB is doing their virtual conference, which is a online version of the World Ticketing Conference. I'm speaking on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, somewhere around between 2 and 2:10. You can search for it online. You can sign up. It's free. I'd love it if you'd be there. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, take it easy.